Hey guys, wanted to do a video here while I'm doing my second dash swap here. Second time being a 1985 Ford Bronco 2, donor being a 1992 Explorer. Last time I believe I was about 18 years old. This time here I'm about 38 years old. Still just as fun, but I wanted to go into a little bit of detail here. So I've got the 85 dash out, as you can see. This opening and this opening are the same in the Bronco. This duct right here is attached to the dash here, and there. So you unscrew that, because in the Explorer dashes it's actually attached back behind, and I don't know if you can see that from here, but it's in there and it bolts up with the dashboard. So your primary points of disconnect, there's 4 bolts, bolts in the Explorer, screws in the Bronco that attach to those 4. The final step in getting the Bronco dash off, you actually have to lift that pad up, which has the speaker grills up here, and then it's got the pad that goes across. There's a fastener here. There's a bar that comes off, I believe it's right there, and then goes over to the dash that you can take the screw off once you get that top pad off. And then the last one over there in the corner, you can see that little clip nut right there. So getting the Explorer stuff to fit. Now the only thing that I haven't really cared to do on mine is on the Bronco, you have the little max AC switch. It's a 2-position cable control that operates that right there. Now on the Explorer, that is a vacuum motor that sits right about here, which does make things kind of tight with the ECU over there. So what I do on this is I would take the glove box, because I rarely operate that. I usually keep it to inside air just because of the amount of bugs and dust that we have up here, this thing not having a cabin air filter. But I would open the glove box, I stick my finger in there, and okay, now I'm on outside air if I wanted to do that. But my scenario, I don't do that often, so I leave it there. The rest of these cables right here flip right in and control as they would. The difference being on the Explorer, when you hit max AC, I believe it activates that vacuum motor and recirculates air, and I think most others are set to take outside air through the cowl. Getting to the other things, there's a few minor things you have to do here. I did highlight this on the Ranger station where I did the dash swap right up. There's a bracket right here. You can see kind of through the tape, there's a couple of spot welds, tack welds right here that hold that bracket down. It comes down, it bolts to the steering column. So I just took that and took a pry bar, went up in between, kind of worked those loose. Whether you drill them out, whatever you do, you're going to have holes, a couple small holes here and here. I've just covered them with tape. I've had good luck with it. I had that Bronco that I swapped from 2001 until 2006. I ended up selling it to another guy, but I never had any issues with doing the tape right there. So the major things with doing this dash swap is you can keep the old dash, especially if you have the transmission. Now the bigger thing between these, right, is the Bronco has a floor shifted automatic and the Explorer has a column shift. So the Explorer, this thing has to be wallowed out pretty good, and you got to have a place to put the shifter through. The manual is much easier. I would not recommend doing the dash swap unless you need it for something. In my case, I have a full donor vehicle, and this Bronco used to be an automatic. So when I priced out the pedals on eBay and looked at taking a dash apart in a wrecking yard, I'm like, you know what? I got that sitting right there. I've done the swap before. I'm just going to do it. So this hole right here, it's actually a lot of the same harness functions that come through the wall right there, or through the firewall. I did a rough cut there. It's hard to center a hole saw when you don't have a center point. But what you can do is take a piece of metal, cut out a 3-inch, and then cut out, say, a 3.5 or a 4-inch, and then silicone that on the outside to the firewall, so this has a nice smooth place to seal up. And then you put the dash harness there, and you can see how many wires that saves you from having to join. Anything from headlights to the ignition switch, the fuel pump, just a lot of saved wiring by doing this. And then the steering column here, this one's a little bit different. You can kind of see it doesn't have to be opened up that much. So what I do is I take a Sawzall, and you can see where this extra piece of metal has been tack welded behind. I just take it and I cut every so often. That way you got a nice clean guide of a circle. And then I grab that with pliers, and then I bend and break these, as you can see there, one by one. And then a couple of these holes are not going to line up, so I just run a self-tapping screw through the Explorer bracket to the Firewall. And then you will have to, you don't have to, I guess, but I trim that Explorer piece there to where it takes up less space. You still got that nice foam seal on it, so you're not going to have air leaking in. And then the same thing there, you can see the outer seal on this. You know, when I get ready to do that, with a piece of sheet metal, silicone that to the Firewall and use that for the pass-through. And then obviously you're going to take your hood release out of here, get your hood release from the Explorer, run that in. Parking brake does not interfere. Your harness for the cruise control goes through right there from the dashboard and plugs into your existing. If you're using the 4.0, you want to take the 4.0 motor just due to the throttle cable differences. As I said, the AC controls, those drop right into those the cable controls up there, and they run it. The dash speaker locations, obviously in the Bronco, are right here. In the Explorer, they're in the door. So I'm just going to take these and extend them in here through the door grommet and leave that as a project for another day. This harness right here goes to the rear speakers and to the front speakers off the back of the radio, a little butchered from the previous owner. But I just take that and I pull that around to the radio compartment. That way I can use existing wiring. And then down there at the computer, that pass-through is the same size. What else here? The blue harness there is HVAC, and you can see that vacuum line that would go here to control the, I gotta pay attention to where I got the camera here when I'm talking. That would control that motor that kicks on your inside or outside air for max AC. The red line there, I can't remember off the top of my head what exactly that goes to. But that's another thing that's integrated into the harness there. Really, other than that, you got your main dash bolt down points that are the same right here. The 4 across the top on there. There's a brace that I believe attaches right here. You have a attachment point right there is a brace to the steering column. Right there is the bottom of the dashboard. And the pedal brace right here interchanges. So like I said, that bracket on the Bronco that we took out, that left the holes. The Explorer has 2 studs coming through right here and right here where that goes over and puts a nut. What I do is I mount it up to the brake booster there first, which can stay as is with the Bronco, or you can take the Explorer. Either way works. The Explorer will allow the low brake fluid sensor that's integrated into this wiring harness to work for you. I'm not positive on the brake line connections. Me personally, I don't do it. I'm perfectly okay with just the manual brakes that were in the Bronco too. But you can open this right here and you can kind of put your hand in and poke bolts through, hold a wrench on them and turn them if you want them. There is enough bracing on it. I wouldn't say it's an absolute necessity, but I would put a little bit of silicone behind the head of those bolts to make sure water doesn't leak in. And then when you're putting your dash up, make sure you get your antenna wire over to the radio, just because it's a lot easier to do at that point. But other than that, I think really everything you need is kind of integrated with the Explorer. And you know, as intimidating as it looks, they used a lot less of these nicer connectors in 1985 than they did in 1992. So definitely a lot more modular on this one. One more thing I thought of before I forget. This harness right here is the dome light and also attaches to these door switches. So you have this one here. This side goes through the dashboard. And I did cut it just because I was in a hurry, and I typically on 4-wheel drive camping vehicles, I rather just manually control the on off on the dome light. I don't necessarily need it to turn on when I open the door. So that I may just tuck that away over here in that handy little compartment that they leave you to tuck it away if you're not going to use it. That's really all I'm thinking of right now. If you wanted to get that to work, I'm sure you could probably replace this. I haven't tried it just because I'd probably be pissed off with trying to get that back up and going. Let me talk a little bit under the hood here while we're on this 4.0 swap. All right, so you see the back side of that harness. That harness there, the white connector that passes through the firewall, comes around over here in front of the radiator and condenser and goes around to the fuse box. It has a couple tie-ins with the other main harness, which is the engine control harness, which, as you saw down there where the computer was, passes through, and that comes around. It has one branch that comes up here, which can easily be identified by these, which bolt there on both the Bronco and the Explorer, Bronco 2, should say. Let's see, there's a couple branches off of that. One of them ties onto the mass airflow sensor. There's a tie-in for the alternator harness. That ties into here, which obviously ties into the fuse block. So once you get kind of those key points, if you can mark those for yourself, I think everything else you can kind of find the vicinity of where it goes. Talking on air conditioning, happen to be certified in it, so it's pretty easy to make AC work. So the condenser, which is your heat exchanger that is inside here for your air conditioning. While we're on that brief break, the heater hoses, as they are, will go right to the same location. Condenser is the same. You have an orifice tube that goes down there into there before that connection is made, and that's at the bottom of your condenser. Now, anytime you open your air conditioning for any appreciable amount of time, and I don't know anybody that can do an engine swap fast enough to avoid this unless you keep the air conditioning intact, you're going to want to replace your evaporator dryer, or receiver dryer it's called. The pressure switch that's on here. So I get the pressure switch, and I get the hose, this hose assembly right here that goes to the compressor and then also to the other side of the condenser. Now this is a 92, which if you may or may not know, 92 came factory with R12 refrigerant, which is becoming very expensive, hard to get, and likely eventually obsolete, or at least cost prohibitive. Now, the compressor is the same. If you're going to reuse a compressor, you're going to want to flush it. I can do a separate video on that if you guys want. But then also you're going to want to take this compressor off and hold it vertical so that this connection right here, the old oil that's in this compressor, will drain out. And then before, well, not really before, I guess you put it in, and you're going to want to add some oil to it. It's probably easier with the compressor inverted, with the pulley down, to pour 2 ounces or so of the oil, which is going to be PAG 46, I believe. If it's wrong, I'll correct it on the video description, but going from memory, PAG 46, you dump 2 ounces in here. That ensures that this thing stays good and pre-lubed for when you go to dry fire your air conditioning when you're charging. In this case, this compressor hadn't run in a while. I may end up having to replace it. Don't know. But any replacements that you get for this system, if you buy it for a 1994 Explorer, it will be better equipped to handle R134 than any other, and will also bolt directly on to what you have. Now, the components I would recommend, because R12 is different, has different pressure, temperature, operating parameters than R134. So the things that you would want to get is that hose, because the hose comes with your fittings, your charge fittings. So the R12, you would have to put an adapter on this. Sorry, the R134, to charge this, I would need to put an adapter here. What does an adapter do? It creates another point of possible leakage. You want to minimize that anytime you're working on air conditioning. The O-rings in the system, I would replace them as a precautionary anytime you're changing refrigerants, which really most of these connections are going to be broken in the process of getting this system put in. The condenser for the Explorer for the 4.0 is different than the one for the Bronco 2. I believe the Bronco 2 has connections both on that side. Actually, I'm sure it does. The Explorer has one over here, which is where this pops into. So this connection is already open. The O-rings are exposed. When you pull the engine out, same thing over there. The only one, actually no, there is not one. There is not one that you would not expose to do a proper AC service on it. So get the kit, 12 bucks. Rub a little PAG 46 oil on it when you're putting it together, and you're good to go. What else? Motor mounts. Motor mounts from the Bronco 2. This side, I believe, will work. I replaced them with 4.0 motor mounts. This one bolted directly in. The other side, the locating pin is in the proper position. The hole, if you look at the back of these motor mounts, and I don't have one here to show you, I don't believe, but there is a locating pin, and then there is a stud that the nut goes through. Both of those pass through the cross member. A mistake I made on my first 4.0 swap is I re-drilled the hole for the locating pin, but it's actually the locating pin that is in the proper place. It is the motor mount stud that needs to be re-drilled. That's a 1/2-inch hole you'll put in there. What I do is I mark both the locating pin, I mark the stud with paint, and then I put it up there in the location where the locating pin would line up with the hole, and then I use that paint to index where I'm drilling through the frame, and worked like a charm. The radiator, they are interchangeable. I recommend the Explorer. It's like twice as thick, looks to be much better cooling, but those will unbolt and rebolt. Radiator hoses, obviously you want to use the Explorer because there's different connection points than there is on the 2.8. Fuel lines on this thing was kind of a pain in the butt. If you're going to do this swap and you want to save yourself some work, unless you have some real emotional attachment or you're very skilled in this, I would highly recommend going with an 86 or up Bronco 2, just because of that, the fuel system. You disconnect that, you plug it in. The motor mount for the 2.9, you don't have to mess with it. And there's a lot of other things too. The harness, if you have a manual transmission Bronco 2 and you're wanting to stay with a manual transmission Explorer, that's probably one of the easiest. A manual transmission with a 4.0. You take the 4.0, you take your harnesses, you take the clutch, and there's very little, if any, fab work of any kind. Yeah, I've done a lot of fab work on this one just because I had it and wanted to make a good, reliable winter beater for the area up here. We got some pretty harsh winters, harsh enough that my Corolla wouldn't make it outside some days. So anyway, enough on the personal stuff. We're back to the conversion here. Obviously I have not finished up wiring here, but I do have a couple things that are hooked up, and it got to a point I just wanted to show you guys. Receiver dryer, this is another thing. So list of stuff again for AC. If you can, order it for a 94 Explorer. If you need it, order it for a 94 Explorer. It will all bolt in, it will all be used. This is the same from an 84 Bronco 2 all the way up to a 94 Explorer. The blower fan is a different part number, but this fan will work in here. I recommend using the Explorer harness here because this is a high blower motor relay, which enables you to get a lot more flow out of your air conditioning. The blower resistor is the same part number, plugs into place. That entire harness was plug and play. The air cleaner mount down there had 3 studs underneath. I put all those into existing holes. As you can see there, those 3 nuts, that was all existing. Gonna want to get yourself some self-tapping screws over here for this stuff. This area was cleared out of a bunch of emissions control solenoids and mostly replaced, as you can see, with electronics from the Explorer. What else? This module here, the EDIS or EDIS 6, if you want to be technical, they're kind of popular modules for various conversions. Get my headlamp on it there so you can see it. I just popped a self-tapping screw through that. It fits well right there. I think it's it's far enough away from the battery that nothing metal is going to get touched if the battery was to leak a little acid. You can see I just popped a self-tapping screw, put that harness, mounted that there. The headlights on my last Bronco, obviously that's a different connector than your old style square halogen beam lights that these come with. Last Bronco I had, I bought a housing that accepted this bulb. This Bronco, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to take this and modify it to fit right onto there. The turn signal and everything works with the Explorer harness. This side, this donor vehicle was in an accident up here in this front, and there was a couple of wires somewhere here. Yeah, right there. So that connector is missing to go into the side marker here, but that is the correct one, and I'll just snag that off the Bronco 2 harness. Power steering hoses. You will want to take the pressure hose from the Explorer, because this seal here into this pump is different. It's a different type of seal on mine than it was for the Bronco. The steering box on these from 84 all the way up to the 94 Explorer is the same. Bronco 2 for sure, Explorer for sure, and I believe Ranger within that time frame as well. Looking at the listings from memory, I believe that is true for 2 or 4-wheel drive. The difference there, I know this one looks like a leaking shit show. The Explorer one out there is better. The pitman arm, I looked on Rock Auto. I did not see a listing for a pitman arm for a 91 and 94 Explorer. But 84 to 89 Bronco 2 is the same pitman arm. What else? Return hose, you can use either vehicle. The Explorer one is the one that I have on here. The Bronco 2 one is just a little bit different on the metal, but it's the same diameter, and it's just a clamp on, you know, for a return. So no big deal there. One question I have I did not answer on my last one, but and I'm going to figure out here shortly. I believe that these windshield wiper motors, I know they are different part numbers, but I believe the only difference in these is this electrical connector right here, which that, as you can see there, is the Explorer, the round one. So I'm going to try to pull that off and put the Explorer one in, and if anybody has that question, I'll let you know. Just, you know, keeps the wiring cleaner, and then also makes it a direct replaceable part. So should it go out, that hood light right there, I still got to mess with that, but that's a level switch. You can take that and it'll work for you. The throttle cable pops out of the Firewall right there. Sorry, it's right there, center screen. That you definitely want for the Explorer. The Bronco 2 is only about this long and will not make that bend and control that throttle. Man, really most of the stuff on this engine goes through a couple connectors. There's 2 on this harness, which are here and here. No, sorry, that's not the right one. There, these 2. And on the Explorer, when you pull them, those are going to be located right down here. Those snap right into the motor here and here. And then there's 2 in the area right there where that heater hose passes behind the alternator. Again, I gotta watch where I'm pointing with this camera. I'm trying to look at multiple things at a time, so apologize for that. Most of the sensors, fuel injection, ignition coils, if you take that computer harness for the Explorer, it's plug and play. There's a couple different levels of wiring swap you can do with this. To an extent, I recommend trying to keep the Explorer system as together as possible. But if you want to go simple with it, you can make this work with just the computer harness and a couple fuses. I like to take the fuse block in this harness over here as well. Number one, it gives you a good convenient tie-in point to where most of your wiring work that you're going to do is right here in the area that pass through. Number two, it's the factory fuse system, factory gauge wires, factory connectors. You know, you're not messing with as much stuff. So I think that's an advantage. Vacuum wise, Bronco 2, you know, obviously has a bunch of vacuum stuff. The Explorer, as far as things that came off the motor, you got your connection to your brake booster. You got the connection to the cruise control module if you have it and if you want to take it. And then this connection right here, I believe, went over to climate control. And that's, in this case, that one is going to get capped. And this stays on the engine. This one stays on the engine. There is a thermostatic diverter over here that comes off of the air cleaner. So you'll have this connection right here that plugs into this, that comes up here to a temperature valve on the air cleaner. And then this one right here, this was broken from the accident that this Explorer was in, but it mounts right down here to a heated air duct like you're used to seeing on the older vehicles. And then it comes up to this opening right here, which takes air from the front of the vehicle. Now, when this senses cold, it activates that diverter and it pulls hot air from there. In my opinion, not totally necessary, but this is the other side of that. And, you know, as you can see, it's smashed. I'm not using it, so that goes up to the air box. I'm probably going to fab that up to my duct point there if I can get it apart without ruining it. Guys, other than that, I think I've about covered it. Let me know if you have any questions. You know what? Let me cover one more thing. Transmissions on this thing, right? So the M5OD manual transmission is by far the choice unit to use with a 4-liter. If you look at your little floor cutout right here that you can unbolt for the manual, or for the automatic rather, the manual probably is going to be a little bit closer to what this is. But what I did is I used this as an index point, and I cut straight up from the center all the way to the front. I used this line right here from the factory transfer case hole. I cut straight up from there. And then I'm trying to remember what I used here. I think it was getting this screw right here for the 4-wheel drive boot in case I have to go that route and fab something up here to where I can get that boot down. And then cut straight across and over. But, you know, there's really no wrong way to do that as long as you can patch the hole. The 4-wheel drive shifter, to use the M5OD, you have to have that 4-wheel drive shifter. There is a way to modify it, but you kind of lose the gating. And when you lose the gate, by the gate, what I'm talking about is, here's a good example. The way you have to move that stick, right? It's in 2-wheel drive, you pull straight back, but to get down to neutral or 4 low, you got to go around right here. So you have to remove that gate to be able to use it with this application, which I don't recommend. But try to find the 4-wheel drive shifter for the application, and should be good to go. One last thing while I'm looking at it, this here goes onto the brake pedal assembly, and that releases vacuum from the cruise control vacuum motor when you hit your brake to deactivate cruise control. This right here is how I resolved the throttle cable linkage. The Explorer pedal was a little taller than this. Just kind of put that at what I felt was a less desirable angle. So it's just simple, 2 nuts, 2 washers on a bolt, and then clamp that to where you want to get it to where when the throttle is real close to down, you start compressing that spring, as you can see right there. That spring is to protect you from over throttling, I guess, if that's a word, the engine, and, you know, causing wear damage on the throttle body. So you want to make sure that that spring is just starting to activate when you floor it, and make sure that it's not bottoming out. Man, other than that, I say that, I probably said that a couple times, and I'm sure I might think of something else, but for right now, we're at 30 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm going to sign off and enjoy. Let me know if you guys have any questions now that we've kind of gone over things. Yeah, let me know. Peace.